Right now, you're listening to the Azeem Digital Asks podcast, the podcast where I, Azeem, talk to some of the top marketers in the industry, find out everything about them, how they got to where they are today, and more importantly, sharing some really useful marketing tips that will help everybody listening to this become better marketers. Stay tuned for another great episode. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Azeem Digital Asks podcast with me, Azeem, obviously. I've got a brilliant guest with me today who describes himself as a father, husband, SAFC fan. I won't guess which SA that is, he can tell me. Director of Digital 22, the brilliant Rikki Lear. Rikki, thanks for joining me.
Thanks very much for having me. Really pleased to be talking to you.
So, first things first, SAFC, which SA is that?
That's Sunderland. So I'm a Sunderland fan, which I can't imagine you get too many too many of those on the podcast.
You're my first, to be
Yeah.
honest, but you will definitely appreciate the fact that whilst at university, I shared a house with both a Newcastle and Sunderland fan. So I now truly understand how deep that rivalry goes, especially on Derby Day.
It does. And I shared a house growing up because half of my family supported Sunderland and half of them supported Newcastle. So they were lovely weekends at Derby ones, as you can imagine.
So we'll sidetrack for a minute before we get into the questions. What's your favourite Derby memory?
So my mum is a Newcastle fan, and I was, what was it at the time, probably 12 or 13, and she asked me to come and sit in the Newcastle end to sit next to her because no one else would go with her. So I was sat in the middle of Newcastle's main stand with my mum watching it, and we beat them 2-1, and their obviously home crowd was going insane, and I'm just sat there with a wry smile on my face. That was definitely the one that sticks out, and it was in a time where Newcastle were decent and they used to beat us in derbies. So it was sweeter that it was quite a rare win, but it was oddly satisfying to sit around all the Newcastle fans while they got beat.
Nice, nice. I think for me, definitely, I think it was Jermain Defoe when he scored
Oh,
against, obviously, Newcastle, and then he just brought it down into tears.
yeah,
Not because he brought it down into tears, but if I remember, it was just ridiculous. If I was a Sunderland fan, I would have just gone
yeah.
absolutely mental.
I did. I can remember it. I sat next to my dad, and yeah, Defoe. We just brought him back over from the MLS. I think he was. The reason he got so emotional is I think that proved to himself that he could still do it at that level.
Yeah,
So he did really tear up, and what a good guy he was for us, and he did loads of good charity work and things as well.
yeah. I'm definitely gonna go back on YouTube now after this recording. But let's get into marketing.
Mhm.
Before we get into marketing, actually, we've digressed a little bit about football. We're going to digress slightly a little bit more. Tell me, you've got your own late night talk show. Which celebrity are you going to have as your first guest and why?
Yeah, it's a good question. This I actually toiled with a lot of Sunderland players, and then I thought no one's gonna have a clue what I'm talking about here. So I went with Will Smith, and bit of an odd one really, but I just think like I thought of it from a marketing perspective first. I've got to get viewers right, and he's huge profile. But I think I'd massively struggle with any celeb that had a huge ego. And I just think for someone of what he's done in his life, he seems like a genuine good person. So I think that's a nice mix of someone who's going to attract the viewers, but I'd actually genuinely enjoy talking to them.
That's a really good shout. Definitely an episode I watched.
Yeah.
He sounds like I should say. He seems like he's doing some really good stuff. Certainly on Instagram and TikTok. He's really down with it at the minute. So yeah, fair play to him. I'd like his bank balance for sure.
Oh, mate, yeah, for sure. But what a guy to go and like you say, the stuff he's taken the time to um, put on Instagram. He doesn't need to do that. Just seems like a good
Yeah,
guy.
absolutely. Right, let's talk about you and your career then, Rikki. When did you realise that you were going to become a marketer? It was going to be for you.
I don't know if this is normal, but I had real laser clarity from quite a young age that I was going to be a marketer. it's a good question because it made me have a good think back. And there was a couple of moments early sort of secondary school that I think made it really clear to me. So I can remember going in my first business studies lesson, and the teacher drew up like, I don't know, some sort of quadrant of business, and you've got finance, you've got HR, you've got operations, and you've got marketing, and she's describing what they are and the role they play in business. And I can really just, for whatever reason, the marketing bit completely resonated with me. And I can remember from that point it being super clear. And then later that same year, I went to visit my dad. My dad at the time was working in Yemen. He worked for British American Tobacco. He'd been sent over there to open a factory, and um, I went. It's random, but went to visit one of his friends there, and he was the marketing director, and he had this awesome CD player on his wall that opened with like you put your hand in front of it and it like opened up. I'm talking what 25 years ago or whatever it is here. So that was cutting edge. That was cutting edge tech at the time. I'd seen nothing like it, and I can remember saying, "My dad, what does he do?" He's like, "He's in marketing." And I think from that year onwards, those two things are just it's got clarity. And to be honest, I'd never considered a career in anything else from that age. It resonated with me. I wanted that wicked CD player and stuck with it ever since.
Have you got the CD player now?
Do you know what? I actually I forgot about it until I sat and really thought about this and how I'd ended up where I ended up, and it's such a vivid memory for me. But it's reminded me I need to go and get one of those because that was awesome.
Right, if anybody from Amazon is listening,
Yeah,
you can
that's it.
send me 10% of
Yeah, I'm sure I'd
that.
have to hunt it down in some sort of car boot sale these days. But that was amazing. I need one.
Yeah, nice, nice. So definitely the first person who's been on the show who knew from the very beginning, like you said, laser focused about getting into marketing, which I guess will make your answer to the next question very interesting. So if you could go back to when you first began in the industry, knowing what you know now, what advice do you think that you would give to yourself?
Weirdly, not that much about marketing. I think that the thing that I probably missed early in my career is the knowledge and the expertise in the what you do aren't as important as some of the. I think soft skills can actually get you further faster than technical skills. I think especially when it comes to communication, like being an exceptional communicator. And I'm definitely not saying I am that, but if that was something that you put time and effort into at a young age, it opens a lot of doors for you. And this doesn't have to be a marketing specific thing, but it opens so many doors. Being an exceptional communicator, it helps you solve a lot of problems. It helps you not get into a lot of problems. And I think that's if I could go back and tell myself that to take the time to really work on communication. Who knows where it would have gone, but I think it would have accelerated my career more than I don't know, doing an extra course in SEO or picking up PPC a year early or whatever it is. Like I strongly believe that some of those soft skills can accelerate pretty much any goal or ambition you've got quicker than the technical skills.
Yeah, definitely. I'm certainly in agreement with you there. I think for me, much like you said, I was very focused on, right, I need to pick up this discipline, I need to learn this discipline. And I never really thought about, right, well, what about communication? So that's a great bit of advice, which I think the listeners will love. Speaking about that and things that you've learned and picked up, can you share with the listeners some of the things that you've learned throughout your working career that have helped you?
Yeah, what a big thing for me is being around people and people's intent. I think a big lesson learned is not to assume people's intent and always go in with genuine empathy and curiosity into situations because it's so easy for all of us to do the opposite, to mind read and convince yourself what people are thinking and why, particularly in a digital age where the conversations are less face to face, like email and direct message and Zoom calls or whatever. It's so it's so hard to read a person. So I think that for me has been a big lesson learned is don't assume that, and try and genuinely understand other people's perspectives before you you jump in 2-footed and come up with your own conclusions. I definitely think that's been a big lesson learned through my career, and again, something that would have probably helped me do better in my career, particularly in the early days.
Yeah, that's a great call. Another bit of a great advice that I think the listeners will absolutely love. Tell me then, Rikki, about yourself and where you draw inspiration from, or who you draw inspiration from. Who has been a big inspiration for you in the industry?
I don't know if this is a stock answer these days, but just Rand Fishkin, like what a legend. Like SEO SEO was my I say was my bag. So I'm not like a day-to-day practitioner of it anymore running an agency, but that like SEO is my skill. That's the thing that made me fall in love with particularly digital marketing. Um, and at the time he was the face of it, doing Whiteboard Fridays before most people had a YouTube channel, and being I looked up to him as the pinnacle of that industry. And as he's matured into other areas, it's more now I look at him from like his moral compass, and you don't have to particularly agree with his view on the world, but he has got a view on the world, and he's transparent with that, and I think that is really important for people to see, that you should have strong opinions and you should stand up for what you believe in. And I think he's epitomised that, and he's a bit of a he's kind of changed. He was a symbol for SEO, and I think now he's a bit of a symbol for like culture and opinion. So, and he's also one of those guys, like they say, don't meet your heroes. But I had the pleasure of meeting Rand, and I run a podcast, and I had Rand. He's one of those guys, like, you don't know me, like, but do you want to come on my podcast? I'm in Boston, you're in Boston, and he's just like, yeah, of course, man. And he's come and sat and spent a couple of hours with me, and um, was everything I thought it would be. He stayed with me and the team well longer than he should have, and was a total gentleman. So it's one of those where you meet someone, and they're not a disappointment, which is always important.
Nice, that's really good to hear. And definitely after the show, if you share a link with me to that episode, I'll make sure to put it in the show notes so that people can hear that as well.
I appreciate that.
So now you are the director of Digital 22, right? So tell me about challenges that you've got right now. How are you overcoming your current
Yeah, being a director of a digital agency, or well, let's put it this way, being anything these days is a challenge. Like I've got to I've got to keep 40 odd people employed, pay the bills, grow the agency because we're a growth company. We want to grow, dealing with the changing needs of clients and services and all that. It's a big challenge right now. There's days that I love that, and that's like being challenged is amazing. I love being challenged, and there's days, obviously during this lockdown and pandemic, where you're like, will this just end? Because I just want it to be back to normal. So that's the challenge. The challenge is the spinning the plates of COVID, and the way we've sat, and we sat day one of back in February or whenever it was, and said what's going to be our stance as a business, and how are we going to get through this. And we said the only way this ends well for us is if we're 100% transparent, with clients and with the team, lead with honesty. Like there's never secrets here. We share profit, loss, financials with everyone in the company. Like there's no secrets there, but more transparency around how decisions are being made, how we're going to make decisions if we get into the places that we're going to have to make decisions. So that was our sort of North Star at the beginning of this. And then the two promises we made to the team is we will do absolutely everything we can to not lay anybody off as a consequence of COVID, and we'll come out of this with a company that you guys can all still continue to have a successful career with. I think it's just really important to lay down what your end goal for this situation is, so that when you're making decisions, you can sense check yourself. Are we delivering on the promises that we made to the team? Because there's so many ways you can go, there's so many decisions you make, but you've got to know the reasons you're making them, and I think that's really helped. It's not just me that has that clarity, it's everyone in the business has the clarity of what we're trying to do, what we're trying to achieve, and then being honest with them about how and why those decisions impact that end goal. But yeah, that's the challenge right now, is getting through this and getting through it getting to the other side of it in a positive place. That's the challenge.
Yeah, yeah. And from everything I can see online, it looks like that you're managing to sort of weather the storm as it stands. Although
Yeah,
at the time of recording, things seem to be going on a bit of a downward trend again, sadly.
okay.
So hopefully we can get through it. But
Yeah.
we're going to spin it around a little bit now, and spin this to a positive, because I noted that when you filled in the form to come on the show, that you had a story about how you started the agency, which absolutely made me scream with laughter. And I don't think I'll be able to do it any justice if I just read the words out. So do you want to just share how things started?
Oh, yeah, like any agency owner I've spoken to didn't plan to be an agency owner, and I guess I was similar. I was on holiday with the missus, having a chat about the future, as you do while you're sat at the beach with a beer or whatever, and we both said this year, "Oh, why don't we have a? We've been in our jobs for a few years. Why don't we have a look and see what's next?" So I made a colossal error of going to work after the flight. So I think we landed back in. I was living in the northeast at the time, so I landed back in Newcastle Airport at like 6 a.m. and I went to work. I don't know what I was thinking. That was my first mistake. So obviously a bit tired, got there, and got to my desk, and there's someone sat there working away. Obviously, they'd hired someone while being on holiday, and that's fine. Had a bit of a chat to them, but then my boss, Christ, he just lost his rag, started shouting, asking for like this report. I don't know I can't remember what it was at the time, like the latest SEO or PPC report or whatever it was. I'm like, I've got no computer use. If you've hired someone, you give him my computer. We didn't have laptops in those back then. It was a physical computer.
Yeah.
Um, and I just thought, you know what? I'm just doing it now. Like, I'm just gonna have my notice in, and I'm gonna change my job. So I just said, look, you can't speak to people this way. I'm off. Here's my notice. So it was 1 minute past 9. Got outside, rang Perry, my wife, and said, we talked about having a change this year. Well, I've done it already. It's 1 minute past 9. I've handed my notice in. I'm sorry, um, but this is the time for change. And obviously, just she supported me. She's fine, better than like she should have been. She was cool with it, and she financially supported us. Like I went in and said I was gonna. I didn't know what to do at the time. I started applying for some jobs. Applied for some part-time stuff, and luckily just accidentally found my way into a few freelance gigs. Like a few people that were hiring for some part-time roles just said, I'll give you some hours and some contracts, and so I started basically freelancing, and yeah, built that again. Just accidentally got more work than me, and it turned into an agency, but it wasn't by design. It was just a random sequence of events and a bit of an impulse moment. But I, I I always thank my wife for the way she took that morning, because she could have told me to like, don't what you're doing, get back in there and apologise and take your job back, which would have probably been decent advice, to be fair. Like, she would have been well within her rights to do that. But yeah, it was God, it was just such a weird sequence of events. But you could, I'm so pleased it happened because obviously the journey I've been on from there has been incredible, and obviously the team, um, the people I've met doing what I do is I wouldn't change it for the world.
Awesome. That's really good to hear. Tell me then, how about learning and gaining knowledge? What are you doing? How are you doing that? How are you learning? How are you keeping on top of everything that's going on with the industry?
Learning is such a core value to me personally, but also to Digital 22. It's literally like written on the wall, that you have to be hungry to learn. It's not only learning, but it's sharing as well, because sharing's a huge part of learning. So it's completely ingrained in me. And to be honest, my free time goes into learning. I buy way too many books, like seriously insane amount of books. I don't read them all. I think I've got an addiction to buying them more than I have reading them. But I get through a book a week. I obviously listen to a lot of podcasts. I do a lot of audiobooks. I'm currently doing a level 7 in leadership. It's like a formal education thing. Do online courses. Like I'm seriously investing to learning, and if anything, I think my downfall is I spread myself too thin. I want to learn. Like, all the books I read are psychology based, really, because I think that's a huge part of marketing, and I quite enjoy reading it that way. The podcasts I listen to are more the day to day sort of news and tactical stuff. And the audiobooks and the sort of courses, they tend to be a lot of I tend to use them for a lot of personal skill stuff. Like I said at the start, like, huge believer in taking the time to improve yourself from a soft skill. So I like I like to listen to audiobooks about how to be a good listener and how to improve empathy and EQI and those sorts of things. I did a good online course on EQI. So when I'm doing online courses and audio stuff, it tends to be about me, making me a more rounded person. But yeah, my biggest Achilles heel is I want to learn too much, and I do spread myself a bit thin. So even just going through this question with you makes me realize, like, what am I doing with that? I'm seriously invested in learning, but maybe I'm that guy who's just, I could do with properly picking what I'm learning and why, and sticking to one thing and finishing it and doing another. But I love learning. It's infectious. Everything you learn has impacts into. It's not just into marketing. It's into the business. It's into impacts your life. And anyone that works here at Digital 22, um, they need that infectious hunger to learn. And the thing we always say is, if you don't learn in digital marketing, like, you're seriously out of the loop in a year. You really are. And our job is, obviously, as an agency, people literally pay us to keep them cutting edge. So if we're not learning and pushing forward, then we're letting our clients down, not just ourselves. So, um, bit of a sporadic answer there, mate. But yeah, I'm doing too much, but seriously, and enjoy it.
No, it's definitely interesting. I think listening to your answer there triggered a quote for me from a talk that I saw not too long ago, all about pretty much, spreading yourself too thin and burning out. And it was something like digital is one of those industries where you could go to bed pretty much on top of things and then wake up and something's changed. I've probably butchered that quote, but in essence,
No.
that's the theme that it comes across. You go to bed on top, and everything else, when you wake up, it's pretty much gone. And things have changed. And I think that's definitely true about the industry, and you're pretty much right. And your point about people's personal development, it's often, certainly in my experience and from what I've seen and the people that I've worked with, and sometimes myself, it's often put on the back burner. Like,
Mm.
every so often, companies will say, you know what, have every Wednesday afternoon, or have every second Thursday, or have a set period of time to do something to improve yourself. But then, by the way, clients just emailed us, so can you reschedule that for next week or whatever? So it's often put on the back burner. I think that's where people kind of fail. It leads me nicely to the next question about failure. So, thinking about the last 12 months, what do you think has been the biggest failure for you, and why do you think that it's happened?
Yeah, it's another brilliant question. I'm going to steal these questions for my podcast, by the way, because they really get you thinking. So I think when I look back on this last 12 months, I think my biggest failure has been getting balance right in my life. Like when you look at the things you've got to juggle in life, like you've got work, you've got family, you've got finance, you've got health. That's so hard to do, and if any of those things are out of balance, it affects the other. And I don't think I'm not a work. Well, my wife probably will say otherwise, but I don't feel like I'm a workaholic. I prioritize family, and I think that's probably rightfully so. And but work's a close second after that. The bit that I've really let myself down on, particularly over the last 12 months, is just prioritizing me and my health. It's always been the last thing, like doing right by your family, and then doing right by the people you employ comes so high that you just it's easy to leave yourself behind. And I'm a big believer in using coaches and mentors, and I I have a great mentor at the moment who just told me how balanced my life was, and has helped me get on the right track with that. And in a weird way, COVID has really helped me address this. It's given me the time at home and the headspace at home to get me into some really good habits with like eating and exercising and working out and looking after myself. And it's a bit of an odd blessing that it's helped me do it. 'Cause I don't know if I would have like say had that space to do it without. But what it's really shown me is when you look after yourself, you're in a position to actually serve others better, like your family and your colleagues, when you do it. And I can't remember who said it to me at some point, which was another trigger point for sorting this out. It's like when a plane's crashing, they tell you to do your own life mask first, don't they? And everyone goes, "Well, I wouldn't. I'd stick my kids on. Like, forget
Yeah,
you. I don't care what your
yeah,
rule is." But there's complete logic in you can't look after them if you're not breathing. Like, so you've got to stick that mask on first. And that's an extreme analogy, but it resonates, because if you get yourself right, you you're in a better condition, whether that's mentally, whether it's physically, no matter what it is. If you're in that optimal condition, you put yourself in a better light to help others. And I definitely think that was my biggest failing, just forgetting that part of the balance. And I particularly just like let it go over the last 12 months. Like, just got in such bad habits of eating takeaway all the time, and because I'm running around after the other things that I'm prioritizing in life. And um, so that was definitely my biggest failure. But in a weird, like say, the weird things with stuff like pandemics and unexpected things is sometimes on an individual level. There's some weird shining light out of it, and that's been it for me.
yeah, definitely. No, I think that's a really brilliant answer, and the analogy that you used about the air masks on the plane just gets the point across brilliantly. You can't help others if you're not looking after yourself first, which is a great way to put it. I think there's a lot of value in that, which is great. So thanks very much for sharing that with us. Let's think about right now then. Appreciate you can't name your clients or anything else, but are you able to share with the listeners some of the projects that you're working on at the moment?
Yeah. So I'm quite fortunate, like being owning an agency. I can kind of pick where I put myself in terms of jobs. So I've got a job. Like, I don't see myself as a CEO or like an MD. I've just given myself a job, and because I love marketing, I'm our marketing director. So I do all of our sales and marketing because I love doing marketing and I love my own company. So I put myself in my own dream job. So the thing I've been working on, which just literally finished a few days ago, is we just took ourselves through a brand evolution, which, like I say, launched literally a week or so ago, and that's been such a huge project for us because I'm sure pretty much everyone's been through some sort of version of brand change, whether it's a full rebrand or a bit more of an evolution like we did, but it's all encompassing. We started back in January with wanting to bring more clarity in our company purpose and what we're here for and what we stand for, and suddenly that ends up meaning you've rebranded your whole company and you've got to go and update 1,500 YouTube thumbnails or whatever it is. Like when you sit down and you start coming up with these ideas and brainstorming, you forget about that bit, and the vinyls on the windows of your office need to check. Like, so we've been through all that. We managed to, I like to think, come to a good place, and I think our team smashed out of the park for us. But that's a hugely involved project and took pretty much all my mind space for several weeks. And I'm sure anyone who's been launching a website or doing a rebrand knows the pain of them last final weeks and days. But for me, that was last week, and I'm really glad it's over. But it's something that I'm proud of as well.
Good, good. Well, hopefully it went well, and hopefully it continues to go well for
Yeah.
you. We're going to do something a little bit different now, which I suppose, given that you have your own podcast as well, you're probably used to it. So pretend you're me for a minute, and we swap roles. What question would you ask yourself that I have not asked you already?
Yeah, the question I always end our podcast on is like, if you could give people one piece of advice, like to marketers, what would it be? And obviously, I came up with that question for our podcast, so I like it. And so, if I was asking me that, the answer that I'd give to people is video. Like, honestly, if you haven't already, try video. It, to a large extent, doesn't matter too much what your goal or outcome is. It can play a big part. So whether it's growing you as a person and your personal brand, or it's trying to grow the company that you're working for, I don't personally, I just don't think there's a better medium right now. And there's so much emotion is encapsulated on video that's, no matter how good you are at writing and how eloquent you are at speaking, just you can't beat seeing people's faces and expressions. And I've honestly seen it firsthand. Like we say we're video first. That's like a thing we are as an agency. And when we made that switch 3 or 4 years ago, I've literally seen firsthand the growth that's given us. But it's not just about the leads and revenue and all that stuff. It's actually about how much just easier it's made to attract the right people, and whether the right people is employees or whether the right people is clients or whatever it is that you're working on. If people see you and hear you and genuinely, and not just you, hear multiple voices of the company, whatever it is that you're working on, it just makes everything easier. Like when I turn up for sales meetings now, people think they know me, and people
Yeah.
know what to. They know I'm not going to rock up in a three-piece suit with a tie on, like, because most of the time you invite pictures and you don't know who's coming through your door. Like, so from their
Yeah.
perspective, but they wouldn't have, if they want somebody like that, which a lot of people do. Those people aren't calling me. Like, I'm going to come in in a t-shirt with a pair of Yeezys, and I'm going to talk to you like you're my friend. And if you don't want that, like, you've listened to me and know me and seen my vibe, that you're not even picking up the phone to me. So it's good that when I turn up, it's just so much easier. And the same with employees. Like, they the people that come through the door now know that they want to be around people like us, and I'm sure that equally puts off people who don't want the vibe that we're giving. But I just think getting out there on video and showing people you, showing people your company, what you stand for, and how you are, and all of that, it just makes life so much easier for pretty much any goal. So that would be my big tip, is if you haven't really gone into that space yet, try it. It's not as terrifying as it. Well, actually, I don't know if that's true. I was terrified for a long time, but it gets non-terrifying after a while. Is probably the nicer way to phrase it. If you can get over that first 5, 6, 7 videos, you see that people aren't out to put you down. They actually, most people like seeing you and will be happier sharing it or speaking to you about it if they see the whites of your eyes.
Yeah, I think that's a great bit of advice, definitely. And the point that you made about video and you might attract the wrong people, certainly you would think that people who saw those videos and then went on to apply to work with you would have a good idea of, the culture of your workplace and be a good fit. And those who thought, well, this isn't for me, probably wouldn't go ahead and apply. I imagine it will be different now with everything that's going on. You're seeing everything in the news about one job post opening and 300 or 400 applicants. I imagine that behavior might have changed, but it's a good way, like you've rightly mentioned, to try and attract the right people to your business, which is great, and hopefully that continues to work for you. So just wanted to end, as I always do, with I'll probably end up making a playlist of this, but I always ask my guests, what's your go-to song artist playlist when you need to get deep in the zone and be hyper, ultra, mega, insert powerful adjective here, productive? What do you listen to?
This probably isn't a good tip, but I put on The Streets, which is, when you read what is good concentration music, it's the opposite, I imagine, because I know a lot of people say don't have songs with words in them and just get stuff that's ambient and whatever. But for me, I like The Streets. It's good tempo. It's positive messaging and stuff, and I just like to crack that on. It gets me in a good mood. It keeps me upbeat. It's actually just not my biggest genre of music that I'm into, but I know when I need to get stuff done, that's my go-to. Stick them on Spotify, and it works for me.
Nice. Any songs you'd recommend to the listeners?
I like Blinded by the Lights. So if you're making a playlist, that's the one I'd flip in there. I don't know if it's got any explicit warnings on it. You need to look into, but it's a good.
We're all adults.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good upbeat tempo song for me, and it gets me in the zone.
Nice. Unfortunately, we're at the end of this episode, Rikki, which is a shame because I've really enjoyed talking to you. I've definitely took a lot of value from some of the points that you've shared. If people want to find out more about you, about your business, or get in touch, how can they do that?
Yeah, digital22.com is where, if I'm going to write, which I try to do every other month, that's where my musings go on the company website. So digital22.com. Social wise, Twitter's my home, really. So just my name, Rikki Lear. Connect with me there. That's where I live. That's where I respond and chat with people the most. So if you want to hit me up on social, Twitter's definitely the place to do it.
Brilliant. Thanks very much once again for being a great guest. And what I will do is let you have the last word on this episode. So the floor virtually is all yours.
Oh, thank you. Just huge thanks to you. Absolute gentleman, and pleasure being on your show. Like I say, awesome questions. I'm definitely stealing some. So thank you very much for having me on. Thanks for the time. And if I've added any value to anybody at all, then I'm really pleased.
So that was another great episode in the bag. I'm really enjoying hearing from some brilliant people in this industry. If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow me on Spotify. Please leave a rating on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you are using. Tell a friend to tell a friend, and hopefully see you for the next episode.